You've reached the last video of this lesson, but don't relax, because this is probably the most important video of the whole lesson. It's also the most easy and simultaneously the most difficult one, actually. We're going to look at the level of development and also how sex relates to our essence. Basically, in sex, we want to connect and tap into the resourcefulness of our essence and that of our partner. Now again, this sentence is both super simple and extremely complex at the same time. And I really think you should try to think about it, or you may maybe meditate about it. Try to see what does this really mean about sex in general, or also your personal experiences. But let me try to break that down a little bit so that it can help you in this whole analysis. Basically, we are going to look at the relationship between orgasm and levels of development. But before we do that, let's maybe look a little bit at the levels of development. Let's do a short recapitulation. These levels of development, or the levels of health, they basically look at the strength of our defense mechanisms of our ego. At the lower level, we're out of touch with our essence, with the holy ID, with our virtue, because we're completely overshadowed by our ego. We're stuck in our ego, so it's somehow suffocating, it's difficult, it's a constant battle. Now on the other side of the spectrum, at the higher end, we have this sense of freedom. We are free from our ego, it feels so easy, it's so resourceful. And in the extreme, it's actually a state of enlightenment. So when we're in the lower levels, we basically long for this nice state of freedom and resourcefulness. And there's different tools that people use in order to try to get there. Some people use spiritual practices, and so for a short time frame, they can experience themselves in a higher level of development. Other people may use psychedelics in order to be catapulted in some kind of other state. But you can also use sex for that. And this is not something new that I'm coming up with. If you're just looking in the French language, people call orgasm la petite mort, or the little death. And it's not just that you have a near-death experience, no, it's basically a short period of time that you experience some kind of ego death. People who have read books of Osho, and especially the book From Sex to Superconsciousness, may also be familiar with this concept, because Osho said that during orgasm we achieve some kind of brief state of enlightenment. And just think about that. I mean, what is enlightenment? In enlightenment you feel no pain, your ego is not there for a short period of time. And indeed, during orgasm, you're not experiencing any pain, neither physical nor emotional, and it's as if you're just not there, your daily problems are not with you anymore. Now, how can we explain this also more medically? Well, we have to look at our central nervous system. The central nervous system has a sympathetic and a parasympathetic part, and you don't need to go into details about it, but it's important to understand that these two parts are never in balance. There's also always one that is a little bit stronger than the other. But it's this balance between these two parts of the central nervous system that creates this sense of anxiety, of fear, which is the basis for our ego to really get stronger. So what happens during sex is that we're basically pushing like the reset button of a computer. When the system is hanging, or in the good old days when Windows, when you had this blue screen, you would just push the reset button, and that's basically what we do during sex with an orgasm. We're resetting our central nervous system, and we're balancing the two out again. Because in the central nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic are never in a balance. It's only during orgasm that they reach that. And this is also what happens in enlightenment. Enlightenment basically means that the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system are in perfect balance. So during orgasm, we reset our system, we recalibrate, we rebalance our three centers, we recalibrate our instincts and so on. And as a result of that reset, we suddenly feel much better. There's no more garbage back there. Everything is going smoothly again. We can think more clearly. We have a bigger ability to accept and love others. We're no longer neurotically seeking affirmation or confirmation. We're no longer seeking security permanently. You may no longer have this need to be dominant or be too submissive. You're just fine with how things are in your life. You're in charge of your own life. So it's actually all about freedom. After orgasm, you no longer feel limited by social pressure or by social control. You feel free from the social control, but also from your own ego. Maybe just a small side remark, what is the opposite of this freedom? And it's something that we see very much in religion. It's repression. Sexual repression is some kind of psychological castration. Why do we castrate animals? We want to domesticate them so that they are not free. We want them to be loyal to us. We want them to be submissive to us. And that's actually the purpose of sexual repression. It's a tool in order to make people dependent on some kind of external authority and without questioning it. But let's maybe go back to the orgasm and levels of development. How would we describe the orgasmic experience through the lens of the Enneagram? Well, basically, during orgasm, we quickly achieve this first level of development, or we may even transcend it. So it's a form of enlightenment. We're free from our ego. But very quickly, we just go down to the second level, to the third, and to the fourth level, and we just get back to our normal state. For some people, this process may happen in just a few seconds. For other people, this may take a few days even. This resourceful state may just linger on for quite a bit longer. But the main thing to understand is that in sex, we basically want to get in touch with our lost essence. We want to tap into this resourceful state that we can get with our essence. So basically, you could also say that our libido is our subconscious desire to transcend our normal ego state or to lower the intensity of the defense mechanisms of our ego. So let's maybe go back to spirituality and sex, because if we're talking about enlightenment, then you're immediately in the spiritual realm. And there's quite some important conclusions we can make here. One is about the importance of sexual energy. Basically, our Creator gave us a tool to get in touch with our essence and a tool to reset our nervous system. And it doesn't mean that we should abuse this tool, definitely not, but it also doesn't mean that we should somehow repress this tool, because this is what religion is doing quite often. Now, even then, in lots of these religions that are repressing sex, they actually do make a point, but they're driving it to an extreme and they're not putting all the nuances in there. For example, quite some religions focus on the sexual function purely through the procreation. They say that the whole recreational aspect of sex is somehow bad. And indeed, sex creates new life, but it's also about our own rebirth. It's about our own reset. It's about procreating ourselves. And this is something that religions are forgetting. The other thing is that religion is also right that sex is an expression of love, because in true lovemaking, we go up the ladder of these levels of development. And in the highest levels, we experience love in the true sense of the word, and not in this romantic view. In the highest levels of development, we really have this utmost acceptance for the other person. And this brings us to the final thing that I want to talk about, and that's connection. Whenever you're asking people why they have sex, the notion of connection will come up quite often. But why? What does that mean, and why is that so important? Actually, here we're getting to the key of this whole video or this whole lesson. On the higher levels of development, we feel connected to the rest of the world. We feel part of something bigger. We feel connected to this unity, to this source, to the oneness. But when we're on the lower levels, we experience the opposite. We experience a lack of connection. We don't feel part of something bigger. We don't feel this connection to the oneness, to the source or this unity. So the lower we are, the more we have this craving for connection. The lower we are on the levels of development, the more we're going to desire to use sex as a tool to feel connected to the rest of the world, to the universe, to the oneness. It also means that the lower we are, the more we're going to seek it, because if you seek connection, it means that you are not connected. And it also means that the more we are seeking this connection, the more we're lacking it, the more we're going to idealize it and romanticize it. So we've come to the end of this lesson. I believe that there was a lot of food for thought, and I really encourage you to reflect very well before you go on to the next videos, or maybe to look at these videos again, because without a full understanding of this lesson, it'll be very hard to understand the next ones.